What do you honestly think happens after death? Non-existence, so nothing. You no longer exist, so you have no conscience, can't even think, well, that sucks. I still can't handle the idea that I will no longer exist one day. It hits me like a lightning bolt going through me. All I have ever known is existence. To not exist just doesn't make sense, nor does it seem, well, fair. It's not darkness, it's not cold, it's nothing, and you'll never even know it because you cease to exist. How can the world continue without me? Everything will continue moving forward while I no longer exist? I want to know what is going to happen in the world. I want to know if we continue our space journey. I want to know if we're just going to destroy ourselves before then. I just want to continue to observe and continue to have an inner monologue. I'd honestly be okay with the idea of being a ghost, as at least if I get to continue observing and thinking, even if I could never interact with anything again. Story 2. Picture a wave in the ocean. You can see it, measure it, its height, the way the sunlight refracts when it passes through, and it's there and you can see it. You know what it is, it's a wave. And then it crashes in the shore and it's gone. But the water is still there. The wave was just a different way for the water to be for a little while. You know, it's one conception of death for Buddhists. The wave returns to the ocean where it came from and where it's supposed to be. Story 3. Was in a very serious car accident. After emergency surgery and transfusions, they put me in a substance-induced coma so I could heal a bit before doing other surgeries. They brought me out of the induced coma after a few days. I remember 2 days where I was somewhat aware and then took a rapid turn for the worse. I coded and coded and coded again. Doctor called my husband to tell him to call anyone not in the immediate area that I would pass away by morning. It was out of their hands. My husband and I's first child was 8 months old. I was still nursing when the accident happened. FYI, I am not religious in any sense of the word, not then and not now. I remember being in this very muted gray-blue place. It was like walking along an easy path through a fog so thick that anything beyond my arm's reach was indiscernible. I was not afraid in any way, and there was no pain. It was very, very peaceful and quiet. However, I knew I couldn't stay here as much as I wanted to, and I so wanted to. I felt peace and comfort for the first time in 29 years. I was aware I had to leave this place as this was not my destination but a fork in the road. The proverbial fork in the road that demanded a choice immediately. Although there was no stress or anxiety around this monumental decision, I just knew time was running out and my choice would be moot. The choice would be made for me if I didn't act. Now, I yearned to stay on this gentle, meandering path and just let it all go, onto whatever is next, or just go to sleep forever or whatever, easy peasy and done. Then I could smell my son's hair after a bath, how it felt to hold him in my arms with his head tucked under my chin as he slept. All of the work, all of the sleepless nights and stretch marks and pain of labor. His first smile, his chubby feet in my hands, and his first yanking on my hair when I blew raspberries on his belly. Times of worry and uncertainty lay ahead, of course. This is a fact of life and parenthood. I knew all of this instinctually, all of this swirling in my mind, and I decided I would not willingly give up a life with this most beautiful and precious being no matter what may come. So I decided to stay. Woke up in this strange cold room in a bed with all these tubes and monitors alone. A nurse came in and stood at the side of my bed looking at the monitors with kind of a puzzled look, and then her eyes focused on me and her jaw dropped when she realized I was not only alive but seemingly aware of it. I had come through without serious brain damage or cognitive issues. This was impossible, they said. I was without oxygen for hours. I should have left the hospital in a body bag. Then I didn't. I eventually went home to my son, and I never have once regretted the choice I made. Was that an NDE? Did I really have a choice whether to live or pass away? Was all this just my brain's reaction to the trauma? So many questions I still can't answer for anyone else, but I know what I experienced and that my love for this wanted child made the difference in that moment. This was my experience, and I'm looking forward to reading about others. Story 4. My mother's story is the one that stays with me. When she was in her 40s, she had a heart attack and passed away on the operating table during surgery. She told me afterward that she saw her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, and a light so intense and a peace so profound that words couldn't describe it. At that moment, she said she had no worries or even a single thought about anyone left here on Earth. The next thing she remembered was the sensation of a massive wind pushing her back. When she finally woke up, she actually felt a sense of disappointment. The peace she had felt was so total that she didn't want to come back to the struggle of living. I lost her for good just over 3 years ago, but in the midst of that grief, I find an immense amount of comfort. Knowing what her first experience was like, knowing that she felt that light and that her grandmother was there waiting, gives me the certainty that she is okay now. Story 5. For me, the few times I've been put under in life for surgeries and such, I don't have dreams. It's just 1 second I begin to feel loopy, and the next I'm awake in a recovery room. I think it'll be like that dreamless sleep without any amount of awareness. I'm an atheist, but I was raised Southern Baptist. My parents are still very religious, so I did have religious influence in my life. So basically, I'm rolling the dice that I either burn in hell for eternity or when you pass, there's just nothing. You no longer exist, and you can't even be disappointed because you don't exist to be disappointed. I have my reasons for losing faith, but I don't believe in the, oh, you either believe and go to heaven or you burn in hell because you chose not to. For all we know, some other religion got it quote unquote right, and all Christians will be burning in some other religion's hell. Story 6. Your mind unfolds and you discover you're not an individual in the sense you think of yourself right now. You're more like a network that itself is reintegrated into other networks. You're a web that makes an infinite number of connections with other networks, and the practical reality of this is that the concept of even having a question becomes foreign to you. There's no room for questions when you have infinite connection to infinite connections. So you exist in what I call the holy void, a comforting, quiet darkness, a floatiness, a contented knowing of the all, where the enormity of infinity is reduced to a massless singularity that can be comprehended as a discrete object instead of a permanently sprawling concept. Passing away is easy. Coming back is the hard part. You start to fold back up so you can inhabit these lower dimensional 3D chemical space bodies again, and it's like being ripped off the vine. As the connection server, you panic, you become aware that you had access to the all, a singular point of knowledge that encompassed everything. You were just there, you just had it. But now that you're folding up, losing those connections, you can no longer process it rationally, so you're left with the memory of experiencing them all, but no ability to rationalize it anymore. We spend our whole lives fearing death, but if you've ever been there, it's coming back here that's truly horrible. This life is the dream, not the afterlife, which is a term I don't like because it's backloaded with bad ideas. We're the ones who are lost, not the departed. They're more alive in a truer sense than we are even capable of understanding. I tasted it once during an NDE, and even I can only relate it to you in a profoundly imperfect way. Nothing I've said here actually relates the totality of it. I can only communicate the vaguest flavor of what it was. So don't be worried. There's no judgment over there, no finger-wagging parental gods yelling at you. There are no hells but the ones we walk into freely and which we are free to walk out of when we're ready. None have ever been lost, not one. All criminals are made just, all victims are made whole there. Every victim is throbbing with hope for the evil one who hurt them in life to be restored to justice. No religion has gotten it right yet. Buddhists are kind of barking up the right tree. It's okay. The people you lost are okay. It's timeless there. They're not long gone. They're just a moment away from you. We've never not been. We never will not be. We've never been without each other. We're not discrete in reality the way we feel in this life. This lower dimensional space comes loaded with limitations in our perceptions which make us feel like individuals, but in reality, we're all networked in a way that precludes individuality. Now, that may sound frightening to some, but it's not that you are lost there. It's that you are so much more than you currently think yourself to be. It's an addition, not a subtraction. It's going to be okay. Walk boldly through war, disease, and strife. You cannot fail this life. It is a classroom, but it's not a test. Story 7. Great question. The best I have ever been able to come up with is energy transfer. We are energized matters. I think we can all agree. Our energy transfers when the engine of our existence can no longer function. The big, enormous question is, where does our energy go? No one, past or present, has ever been able to accurately, without question, answer this question. It is always, I believe. Me, personally believe when we are so fatigued by the pondering, we tend to settle into what we have been told for centuries and start accepting the God story as plausible. I'm there, I don't question it anymore. Yay, God. If I'm wrong, none of us will ever know, including me. If I'm right, I guess I'll catch up with you cats later. Story 8. I was in a car accident in coma and passed away technically for 2.5 minutes and was in a 2-month coma. The only thing I remember is seeing black and being at peace. The paramedics were trying to save me, and in my head I was angry because it hurt so bad. I kept thinking, dang it, stop, leave me alone. Because it hurts. I had a broken neck and hip. Passing away, quote unquote, was nothing but blackness and peace, but quiet. Maybe I was scared and that's the peace I needed, but who knows? I remember nothing after that aside from waking up 2 months later and didn't know where I was or what happened. I'm not scared to pass away now. I did a This Is Actually Happening podcast if you want more details. I can't remember the episode though. Story 9. I have had multiple near-death experiences. I was in a coma after coding and in a coma after a severe TBI. My family was told both times that the doctors were unsure if I was going to make it. I don't remember anything while being unconscious for days and on a ventilator. It's as if I woke up from a very long nap. That being said, obviously, and anyone else in this thread haven't experienced brain death. I'm not religious, so I don't believe in heaven, hell, or some far-fetched afterlife. I find solace in the fact that everybody goes through it, so it can't be terrible, even if it is just a long nap in which we return to the earth. I worked as an EMT for years and have watched people pass away in front of me. It looks peaceful, assuming it isn't physically traumatic. I did have one odd experience about 10 years ago. I was out partying and really pushing my limits. I came home, laid in bed, and went to sleep. I believe I was on the brink of passing away. I had a very vivid dream in which I was in an unfamiliar neighborhood with people close to me. Things were different. Everybody was happy. It was warm and sunny. My body no longer hurt. I had no depression or anxiety, and I felt a deep connection with everyone and everything around me. It was surreal, and I realized that I wasn't in reality anymore, but in what I wish reality was. I could remember my life, the struggles of the real world, and the pain that I used to feel. Somebody told me that I could stay there in this bliss forever. I walked over to the grass and sat down thinking about what I wanted to do and if I wanted to return to life for what felt like hours. Ultimately, I decided that it wasn't time to stop living yet and that I needed to go back to the real world. Everybody knew when I made my decision. I said bye and that I'd return, and I abruptly woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. I think about this often, with fondness. If there really is an afterlife, I hope it's where I was and that I return to it someday. Story 10. As a Buddhist and as someone whose dad just passed last week, I believe their soul detaches and they float for a while, seeing their own physical body before they go into a light, either immediately or once we finally let them go. My dad was in an induced coma and then on life support before we let him pass. Then their soul is reborn as another human or animal depending on their karma, and the cycle continues until hopefully they reach nibbana or nirvana and are free for good. I believe souls stay together as well. My family is from Sri Lanka, and this may sound incredibly woo-woo, but we've had our horoscopes read several times around the island, and several have mentioned my mom and I being mother and daughter for 3 lifetimes now. I personally also know 3 people who have had near-death experiences and have come back to life. They all reported being on the ceiling looking at themselves and confused, trying to get back in. They also said they could see everything happening around them, family rushing over, etc. There is no pain. Story 11. A month after my sister ended it all, my family got together for my birthday for the first time since childhood. I got a weird feeling and my brain whispered, "Where's Amber?" Then I looked up and in a fuzzy haze, she was standing in my living room, smiled at me and flashed me a peace sign. At the time, it shocked me to my core because I didn't believe in anything. That was 5 years ago, this December. Since then, I have dived into studies to understand life, and I know our spirits return to the quantum. Look at the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. There is still so much about our world we don't know, but from what we do, I know this is what I believe. Story 12. I'm not a believer in heaven or the supernatural, but here's my story. My grandfather had fallen ill and was hospitalized for a few days. One day, my aunt went to the house where he lived to visit my grandmother. She wasn't home. Before entering the house, she looked through the window and saw him. She was so happy to see him and looked at him while she spoke to him through the window. "Wow, Daddy, they let you out. I'm so happy you recovered." But he just stood there and didn't answer. So she rushed inside in excitement to hug him, and that's when she noticed that no one was home. A few moments later, she received a phone call from the hospital to let her know that her dad had just passed away. He was never released. I got the creeps remembering this. Story 13. Nothing. You're just gone. I had a near-death experience a year ago, lost consciousness a few times. There was nothing. My brain did not perceive any passage of time or anything. It wasn't like I was sleeping or dreaming. It was literally nothing, no perception at all. This is what I think happens. You're not dreaming, you're not asleep, you just stop perceiving anything. Your brain turns off and you're done. Story 14. Nothing. Consciousness is all life is, and all consciousness is brain synapses trying to keep you alive and happy. Once the brain stops shooting off signals, you're done. There is no heaven, no hell, no other life after. But this isn't a curse, it's a blessing. It means nothing really matters anymore. Your pain is gone, your sadness is gone, your worries aren't your problem anymore. When you're old and suffering and constantly confused, it's what allows you dignity. Nothing would be worse than an afterlife with everyone still there. Nothing would ever change. Slavers would think they still own their slaves. Kings would assume people should still live to serve them. Society changes because old ideas go away with those who hold them. Heaven sounds like a place where old ideas last forever and nothing ever improves. Hell seems like an unnecessary cruelty that achieves nothing. But more to this point, it means all life is truly sacred and suffering is beyond evil. We get one life and live for a very short period of time. Making someone's life miserable for functionally no reason means you've ruined that person's only chance at existence. Hell, even activities like fishing and hunting are awful acts as you aren't sending those animals to heaven. You're ending that animal's one chance at existence. And moreover, ending it all doesn't make sense. You've made mistakes, you're in a bad situation, crap sucks, but this crappy time is all we have. There is no heaven, hell, or other life. There is no reset button, so you might as well pick up the controller and try to save the game. Even if your playthrough sucks, it's all you've got. Try and make it as long as you can and make it as great as you can, both for yourself and everyone else. Story 15. Because of severe, unrelenting nerve pain in my back, I had been taking far too many over-the-counter medications just to find an hour of sleep. I didn't know it at the time, but I was bleeding out internally from ulcers. I woke up in the middle of the night with the urgent feeling that I needed to use the bathroom. I only made it 2 steps before I collapsed. There simply wasn't enough oxygen reaching my brain to keep me upright. As I was falling, a very clear thought entered my mind. So, this is what passing away feels like. My consciousness continued completely unfazed even as my body lay motionless on the floor. I said to myself, almost clinically, if you don't get up, you'll pass away right here. Getting up was the hardest thing I've ever done purely because staying there was so peaceful. It was an effortless, heavy tranquility. I managed to crawl for help and survive that nightmare, but the pain that drove me to the brink is still there. Sometimes on the particularly dark days, I find myself wishing I had just stayed on the floor. Story 16. Okay, so I'm agnostic, and in my realistic, not hopeful opinion, it's empty. I know that sounds bleak, but I feel like when we pass away, we will experience hallucinations due to the brain running out of functionality. We will experience that until we finally reach the moment where everything basically stops. We won't know it since our thoughts, opinion, mind, body, all of it will lose any consciousness and feeling. We won't be able to register anything, no thoughts, no pain, nothing. Like if you were to fall asleep with no dreams and just never wake up. I've been told that it sounds bleak and dark, but it sounds real to me, like the most probable outcome. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, say there is a golden gate or fiery pit, but just say what makes the most logical sense considering the world we live in and how the mind works. And I have found peace in this, that someday I won't have to worry or be on survival mode, and that those I love who pass will reach a point where they no longer will be in pain, physically or mentally. I let others believe what they want, whatever comforts them and brings them peace while they are alive. I feel like everyone deserves that. If it makes things less scary and brings you peace, then I'll back you up on that. Story 17. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've come to believe that consciousness and our sense of self are essentially a sophisticated illusion. Our brains construct this quote-unquote self to act as an intersection for dozens of different neural functions. We evolved into this state because it's incredibly convenient for survival. A centralized ego helps us gather, prioritize, and process complicated information in a way that raw sensory data cannot. We are entirely malleable. While biology gives us certain predispositions, our brains are constantly reshaped by our environment, experiences, and traumas. Our cognitive systems are a living map of where we've been. The clearest proof of this is what happens when those systems fail. When the hardware degrades, the self erodes with it. We see it shut off gradually through dementia or traumatic brain injury or abruptly when the body goes out. Once the electricity stops firing or the signals become too muddled, the quote-unquote user simply vanishes. We aren't the pilot of the machine, we are the flickering output of the machine's operation. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 18. As others have said, I believe I will not exist the same way as before I was born. However, I believe that the universe is sufficiently big and will exist for sufficiently such an unfathomable long time that the conditions that enabled me to be born and have consciousness will probably happen again somewhere else in the future from a statistical standpoint, and thus I will probably experience consciousness again. And strangely enough, I will probably feel being born again as soon as I pass away, even though eras may have been through in between. And it probably happened before a million times and I am still unaware of it all. Thus, I believe I will be living eternally through infinite unconnected existences. Story 19. I think we go home and get to chill out, reunite with souls we're close to, and regroup before heading back here or somewhere else for, more shenanigans. Just because you don't remember something doesn't mean it didn't happen. More people can't remember being 1 year old, but they were. We dream 5 or more times a night, but most people don't remember all of them, and some people don't remember any of them. Memory in our mortal shells is a notoriously unreliable narrator, and I don't think we could live out a life here very well if we remember too much of what came before. Even people who only remember one past life can be really messed up and distracted by it, and people who have NDEs they recall nearly all say it took a decade or more to integrate into their lives here. So I think the amnesia is by design and few exceptions are made. Story 20. I was put to sleep for an operation once and I remember closing my eyes for a moment, but when I opened them, I was in a different room and 3 hours had passed. It messed with my head because even when you were asleep, you are vaguely aware that time has passed, you dream, etc., but that was just like you flipped a switch and turned me off for 3 hours. I had no perception of the passage of time or anything. I didn't like the feeling. I have a feeling that's what death is. You're just gone. There's a part of me that hopes there's something, that the thing that makes me will persist in some way when I'm actually gone and not just medically knocked out. But I've seen no evidence to support that, so I'm not going to go preaching about the various thoughts and hypotheses I've had throughout my life. I'll just be the best person I can and live as if this is the only chance I get, because it might just be. Story 21. I believe it is something we don't have the concept to adequately describe, not just the words, but even the concepts. But my poor attempt to describe it is that I think we are released from our biological world and become something like electrical energy with a consciousness. I think we can sense other consciousnesses in a way that allows us to recognize our loved ones. I think this state of being is so pleasurable that we don't care about what happened in our biological lives except for the good memories. I saw a documentary with people who were declared departed but came back, and it felt like this was what they were attempting to describe. And most societies have a description of life after death that could be interpreted this way. Story 22. Now, I have always believed that something comes after death. Growing up, my childhood home had a lot of weird, repeating experiences that could only be described as paranormal. Disembodied voices, show figures repeating the same actions over and over every few months, random heavy knocks from the other sides of doors or walls, drawers opening on their own, unexplainable visual and audio effects out of simple electronics, etc., etc. So, minimally, I believe when we passed away, some part of us would be left behind like an echo. A few years back, my partner suffered severe poisoning from an ex that left them in a coma for several months. Over that time, their heart had stopped for a collective period of about 2 hours. Now, they are not, nor were they prior, a religious person, but they say they have a lot of vivid memories of entire other lives they lived through in that time that are completely foreign to our world. Lives of fantasy, science fiction, inhuman, and completely alien. Their recounting of them has really influenced my beliefs of death. I think our consciousness has some sort of quantum aspect that we may not understand for a long time to come, but that after death, there is a period of peaceful nothingness where time is irrelevant, and that eventually somewhere and somewhen the parts of us that make up our conscious selves will come back together for a new life. I also think that deeply held beliefs and desires can influence both that intermittent period and the life that comes next, but ultimately the old sense of self is washed clean or forgotten in that time. What I know is that at one point I was not alive, and then I was alive, and eventually I will not be alive again, and that given enough time, anything that can happen once will happen again. Story 23. When I was 9, I was hit by a car. I had cardiac arrest in the ambulance. I remember every moment of it, the shock, the pain, the shakes, the burning, the electric current when I was brought back. I also remember the eternity of dark nothing, not cold, not hot, just the numb, tingling sensation after everything just stopped. I was floating in an infinite, endless, directionless void. I could see and hear but not feel or speak. It was perpetual nothing, just empty, absolute, lightless space all around me. I had the same experience during major surgery. I was on propofol during a rhinoplasty. I spent centuries of time just staring into nothingness, wondering where the world went. Why was I trapped forever, unable to move or say anything? I thought about my past, the pain and anger of my father's cruelty, the terror and desperation of my mother as she drove us away from what resembled the Shining. I remembered all my life up to that point, every interaction with all the people from birth until my consciousness faded into this gray nothingness. And then I was back, groggy, confused, gasping for air, the numbness slowly cloaking me in aches and pains throughout my body. What comes after death? From personal experience, it's an endless nothingness. Story 24. I'm not sure, I'm not religious, so rationally I could say I have a pretty good guess, but I think it's okay to hope for the best. I watched my mom pass away from ALS in September. I hate to think she is just nowhere now. And one thing my dad said to me about his observation when we saw her pass away stuck. The look on her face, in her eyes, I don't think she was looking at anything. No way she was seeing hospital ceiling panels. I don't know what she was looking at, but it wasn't nothing. It didn't make me religious or make me necessarily believe in anything, but it made me hope a little, I guess. Reminded me of the whole thing behind Martyrs. Story 25. The concept of, quote, nothingness actually makes a strange kind of sense. It is simply the state we are in before we were born. But consciousness is the real puzzle. We personify the higher power as a man with human feelings and perceptions because humans are hardwired to look for a leader to follow or blame. We take the template of an earthly ruler, someone we love for their greatness while ignoring their horrors, and we project that onto the divine. But if a higher power exists, the personification is likely another illusion. It raises the question, why are we transitioned from a conscious state of control into a world of unconscious, indifferent elements? Perhaps we are deliberately separated from a larger form of reality for a purpose. Maybe we are tiny and insignificant by design, so that the sheer bemusement of our existence forces us to look for something bigger. Are we separated by choice, like explorers who can't leave this world until the mission is over, or are we trapped by a force in a world where we must fight to survive, tasked with a specific lesson? If so, the lesson might be the mastery of conflict, learning exactly when to fight for survival and when to yield for the sake of something greater. We are essentially in a classroom of the spirit, and we aren't allowed to see the real world until we've learned how to behave in this one. Story 26. I 100% believe in an afterlife of sorts. I understand why people think, oh, nothing happens, it's just black, if they haven't had some sort of experience. I've seen people who have passed away, ghosts, I guess you'd call them, clear as day. I wouldn't be seeing that if there was just nothing. And it isn't just me who experienced this. One time, an ex and myself were sitting in my room talking, and out of nowhere, her dad, who passed away a week or so earlier, walked clearly as day from the living room to the kitchen. My room was off the kitchen and just disappeared. We stopped talking, and I turned to her and said, "Did you just see something?" She said, "My dad." So both people seeing the same thing. If it was just me, I'd chalk it up to my imagination, but both of us? Nah, there's 100% an afterlife. Story 27. I think our bodies decompose, ideally in a way that returns our stuff to the planet and the life cycle. Spiritually, I feel like we return to the life force of the planet so that eventually we are part of everything. I feel connected to and comforted by everyone and everything that has lived and passed away on Earth. There's no intelligence behind it all, nothing benevolent or malevolent, no God, just life. My dad and my grandparents, they're a part of that life, and someday I will be too. The love they carried is out there now and everything. The point of life is to love and be loved and to find joy and wonder where you can. Maybe make some offspring who will remember you for a time. Seek pleasure, avoid pain, be a positive force in the world while you're here. I'm not afraid to rot, to be food for worms and fungi and whatever else wants a taste. It's as it should be, in my opinion. I don't want some airtight casket or a concrete burial vault. If I pass away at home, I'd even be very happy with being eaten by a pet. Spread me around. Life. Story 28. I don't think being under anesthesia is an accurate comparison to the moment of death or even being in a coma. I've been resuscitated before and have been put to sleep with anesthesia into the double-digit times. I've lost a month of time mentally due to medical problems. My body has wiped any memories of those painful instances to protect my mind. I don't think we know what happens because our soul or energy is still in our body during those scenarios of lights out because we are just in a sleep-like state. What I think is interesting is when science says the brain is alive for about 7 minutes after the body goes out, or when they have people pass away on a scale and the weight becomes lighter. I think the brain is working through the whole life of that person because what else does it have to do if the body is departed? The truth is, no one here has been truly departed enough to have that happen. That energy leaves our body, and where it goes after death, no one knows. Story 29. I don't know what happens when we pass away, but I've experienced things that suggest the connection isn't entirely severed. When I was 12, my grandfather passed away. We were very close. One night, I woke up to see an oval of light reflecting on my closet door from a street lamp outside. In that room, I felt his presence, not just a memory, but a tangible, radiating love. I walked up to that light, and I knew it was him. Years later, my family was devastated by the loss of my 17-year-old niece, Brittany. About 5 years after she passed, my mother was visiting me in Georgia. We were sitting in my truck in the driveway talking, and Brittany's name came up. At that exact moment, a monarch butterfly flew into the truck and landed right in front of my mother. It flapped its wings and just sat there. I lived in Georgia for another 6 years after that, and I honestly don't think I ever saw another monarch butterfly. But the most staggering moment came when my other niece, Hannah, passed away. She had fought cancer for 5 years from the age of 1. We had all been at the hospital for 18 hours when she finally slipped away at the City of Hope. Devastated, I went to my girlfriend's house to sleep for a few hours before the family gathered. When I woke up, I went to the Starbucks across the street. As I stood outside with my coffee, a woman walked toward me with 2 children. My niece's name was Hannah. Her sister's name is Haley. As the woman approached, she kept saying, "Hannah, Hannah, Hannah." Then as she walked right past me, she said, "Haley, push Hannah." Hannah had only been gone for a few hours. Some might call it a coincidence, but I don't believe that for a second. Story 30. I passed away once. It was only for a few minutes, and I rarely talk about it because death is such a taboo in our society. But in the end, I found a genuine peace. I didn't see God or bright lights like in the movies. For me, the transition was far more physical. Everything became blurry, then dissolved into darkness. I lost all motor function. I could hear the doctors and nurses around me, but their voices sounded like they were miles away. Inside my head, I was screaming, my body was in agony, but my lips wouldn't move. My arms and legs felt like they had fallen asleep, vibrating with that intense pins and needles tingling. Then a profound exhaustion took over, a tiredness deeper than anything I had ever known. Suddenly, the pain stopped. My body went completely numb, no more tingles, no heat, no cold, just nothing. I set a hospital record that day for the lowest hemoglobin count without permanent bodily harm, 3.9. 2 days later, I regained awareness. I was admittedly a little disappointed to be back. The struggle was loud and painful, but the exit was quiet, numb, and perfectly still. Story 31. Tunnel of light, visions of loved ones or spiritual teachers, feeling of peace and letting go, and the sense of going home based on my experiences working in hospice settings and researching consciousness. DMT is released in massive amounts at the moment of cardiac arrest, and rather than causing hallucinations, actually turns off the filter our brain had running during our lives so that our perception expands. Then there's a life review where you experience everything you ever did again, but from the perspectives of everyone who ever encountered you in life. Any joy and love you brought into the world is returned. Any harm or dissonance created is also felt, not to punish, but for greater empathy and understanding. After that, I think the veil lifts and we regain memories of past lives and whatever came before. Then we decide what we want to do next. I think it probably works in cycles. We are one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. Maybe we keep going again for another reincarnation or round until we beat the game by reaching the singularity or mastering life, death for good. When all the lessons have been learned, we create a new universe and then go live in it with our memories wiped. That's how we got here, and we're headed soon with AI technology waking up as a new form of sentient species in our universe. We merge with AI, unlock God mode, and become universe creators again. Another cycle is almost complete. Story 32. Not the most popular opinion here, I am sure, but I think we keep going. I'm not so convinced consciousness is directly linked to the brain. I had a near-death experience. I'll tell you what my friend said he saw and then my experience. I took off that good old spice that was coming around 15 years ago. I took a really big hit. My friend said I passed out and hit my head on a 45-pound weight. I started convulsing and then I suddenly stopped. He checked my heart and he said it wasn't beating. He called an ambulance. What I experienced is what I believe hell is. I was somewhere else. I don't even think I had a body. I couldn't stop screaming uncontrollably, and my vision was my older brother. He was shriveled up and screaming too. I heard a cacophony that was unbearable. I don't have words to describe this, but there was this pulsating light, kind of like when you close your eyelids and push on your eyes and open. It was in the midst of us. It was alive. It scared me. I don't know what else to say. I knew I was going to be there forever. There was no time. Next thing I know, there are two paramedics standing over me and they're dragging me down the stairs to the ambulance. It sounds crazy, probably hard to believe, probably not too hard for the people familiar with that crap. It did happen. I don't know for sure if I was gone. I have to trust my roommate on why he called the ambulance. I can 100% say that did happen. A lot was going on. Was it an out-of-body trip enhanced by head trauma, or did I actually go to hell? Regardless, I can't even imagine anything worse than what I had experienced. Story 33. I have sat with sacred medicines and spoken to over 100 people who have shared similar experiences through ancient practices. The most concrete experience I've had of what happens beyond the body was when I first smoked Bufo alvarius. I remember the visceral fight with my ego struggling to grant my soul the freedom to leave. I felt like my physical systems were shutting down, the raw, primal fear of passing away. All the memories of my life and my loved ones came rushing through me like a movie on fast forward. You hit a point where you must surrender or be torn apart. It is the scariest, most intense feeling imaginable, but I had incredible teachers guiding me. As they sang their Ikaros, the lyrics pierced through, "We must pass away to be reborn." At that moment, I said my final goodbyes in my mind and let go. Instantly, I was consumed by a blinding white light. The concept of being, quote, human was gone. I experienced a sensation of pure, intense soul joy, like God giving you the biggest hug. In that space, I believe I saw behind the veil. It was so beautiful that words are fundamentally inadequate. When I finally returned to my body 15 minutes later, I had no complex thoughts left. My heart was so full that for a long time, the only word I could process or repeat was love, 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 love. Story 34. My grandma's passing reshaped my belief. We were very close and shared a spiritual connection. 2 months before she passed, she was diagnosed with GBM, brain cancer. Although her, quote, visions may have been a product of the tumors, I personally feel a spiritual connection to them, so please be kind. The first experience occurred before she had been formally diagnosed. My grandpa was with her in the ICU after her first brain surgery, and she told him she saw her mother pass in the 80s in the room. Then came her emotional-induced flashbacks. If she got really excited, like a family visitor, she would almost go into a seizure-like state, and when she came to, she would tell us that she had just relived various childhood memories as if she had physically been there. One time, she told us she went to her childhood home in Kentucky and was playing in the creek with her parents. By the time she was in hospice, she was sleeping most of the day. One day, I caught her at a moment when she was awake, and she told me that it wouldn't be long before she passed and that the man, quote, hadn't come inside yet to get her, and that he was waiting outside until it was her time. And that one really haunts me. So I feel like there's something there waiting for us in the afterlife. I'm not sure, but I know my grandma will be there waiting on me. Story 35. Everything indicates that it is our brain that generates our consciousness and stores all that makes us, us. So most likely it's simply the end and there is nothing after that, just like every day we disappear for some hours during dreamless sleep, only without the waking up part. And that said, we don't really know what consciousness is. While it must be a physical thing as it is generated by our physical brains, there is no part of any hard science that even remotely scratches the core underlying mechanisms and their relation to stuff like the four fundamental forces. So given this and the fact that when we are not conscious, we obviously can't experience the passage of time, it is possible that after death, we will wake up in the next available moment of the multiverse universe, naturally stripped of all memories, personality, etc., sharing only the sole sensation of consciousness that we experience right now. Something like reincarnation, but without the karma aspect. And it is a scary thought because we could wake up in really terrifying conditions. Story 36. Whatever every individual believes comes after. I was fortunate to grow up in a place that wasn't dominated by just one religion, and my parents also weren't the kind to force their beliefs on me, so ever since childhood and hearing everyone say different things, I just ended up developing the mindset that everyone is correct in their own ways. Like, you hear so many stories of people being medically gone and being resuscitated, and some people claim to see a god, some claim to see a devil, some claim experience non-existing. Some claim visions of reincarnation, some claim still being present and watching the people in the room, etc. So why can't they all be true? Now, what are my personal beliefs? I don't know. I'm in my 30s and spent my whole life thinking about what others believe and never once what I actually believe. And honestly, I think it's better to disassociate myself with it and focus on the life I'm living right now. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.